Kneecap, they've been in the headlines for the past couple of days. You heard Eamon mention it there a few moments ago, and you'll know we spoke about the controversy over their comments at the Coachella Festival in the US last week. Sharon Osbourne then calling for their US visas to be revoked. And since then, it has rumbled on. And some people might say why, and it's because a lot of listeners feel, callers, even a lot of people online and social media feel that Kneecap's commentary is nothing new, and people have been scrolling back through videos, comments that were made, posted, shared on social media over the years. So since all of that, Kneecap have now apologised to the two families of two former British MPs who were murdered in recent years. They've said that they don't support Hamas or Hezbollah, and this is after videos from past gigs came to the attention of police and politicians. They've also released a statement, and Kneecap took the opportunity to criticise what they describe as a smear campaign against them over their support for Palestine. And in the statement as well, when they released the statement after a video appeared to show a member of the group shouting "Up Hamas, up Hezbollah," while others appeared to show a member saying "The only good Tory is a dead Tory." So they've apologised, released this statement and gone on to say that establishment figures desperate to silence us have combed through hundreds of hours of footage and interviews, extracting a handful of words from mouths or for months or years ago to try and manufacture moral hysteria. And we're asking you today, do you think that Kneecap were right to come out and release this statement and effectively apologise? Alan Buckley is the head tour guide at the Irish Rock and Roll Museum Experience in Dublin. What's your thoughts, Alan? Were they right?
Well, thanks for having me on again, Andrea. Always happy to join in. I just want to say, just from the outset, I am the tour guide in the museum, but my views are my own. And I think it's important to say that because it is such a delicate and controversial issue. Were they right to apologise? I think they were. And I think it's coming from a sincere place. I suppose if I get into being an apologist for Kneecap, I might find myself being on... Well, it can be at times, tricky and B, unnecessary because they are their own guys. They have their own opinions. We spoke last week about how if you're booking Kneecap, you're going to get Kneecap. But I do think that they've come out at the right time to clarify some things and apologise, because I think that in the white heat of a live show, and particularly a high-octane show like a Kneecap show, things are going to get said in the heat of the moment that maybe in the cold light of day or taken out of context will seem incredibly inflammatory, etc.
And that is what Kneecap say happened actually in their statement. It's a long, full A4-page statement. I should say, if listeners haven't seen or had an opportunity to read it, and they say that they feel that some of the commentary was taken out of context. I tend to agree, and I also do tend to agree with them that at this point the knives are out. And you could say, well, that sounds a bit conspiratorial or whatever, but Kneecap have been speaking out very vocally about a particularly contentious issue, of which, shall we say, there's very little grey area. There tends to be the people who are, say pro-Israel, and then there's the people who are pro-Palestine. There's not a lot of sort of middle ground. So if you start making statements about that, you're going to put yourself on one side of the argument. It's pretty obvious which side they're on. And that's not popular with large swathes of the establishment. It really isn't. And I do think that whatever, I can't defend various statements that they've made, I would probably like to put them in context. But I do think that coming out and saying, listen, let's take a breath. This is what we believe. This is what we don't believe. And if we caused offence to the murdered families, etc., then we are genuinely sorry. And I know some people think maybe that's a bit mealy-mouthed because they've kind of equivocated and put in extra information. But I do think that's their right as an artist. We don't necessarily have to agree with anything Kneecap say. There's lots of art out there, and there's lots of entertainers. I've given, in my life in the museum, I've given more than 5,000 tours. And at times I have said things in the heat of a moment, a controversial opinion that, if taken out of context, and I'm not likening myself to Kneecap, but what I will say is we've all done that in a moment where there's been a momentum to a show or a performance where you've gone too far and you've said something that is,
outside of the realm, certainly, of common decency.
With hindsight, look, who are you telling? I mean, Alan, I know only too well how easy it is, and look, absolutely, you have to be mindful of that, and sometimes you just even, a wrong slip of the wrong word and it can land you in an awful lot of trouble. Look, I think the point that they're probably trying to make in all of this is that people have gone back, they have researched, they've gone through the archives, they've pulled out old footage, old videos, they've reread over statements, commentary, posts made online. And that's why I think Kneecap feel that their accusation that there's a smear campaign against them, that people are saying, what you said at Coachella, you say that maybe a lot of the time, it's not the first time you've shared views like that. We're going to show you, and we'll go back and we'll root out the evidence.
We'll show you up for who you really are, and fair enough. Okay, if you've said it, you've said it, and it's there as a matter of public record or whatever. But you do, and I really do listen to them in this point, you really do have to look at the motivation of someone doing that to try and, shall we say, tar them completely or besmirch them because it suits the argument on, say, the Israel issue or the Palestinian issue. I know it sounds, potentially, who's going to do that? There are definitely vested interests of people who don't want the Palestinian argument to be put forward. And there's, as I said, I'm not positing myself on any side of the argument, but if I look at it objectively, I know that there are people who would very much like to put Kneecap in the dustbin of history and move on, or have them banned or silenced or their visas revoked, whatever it is, because they say unpopular things about a particular position, and the people who disagree with that position are very likely to try and figure out a way to make them look bad. And, sometimes it's their own fault, but as I said, I think Kneecap have a very valid point to say. If you go back through the record of all of our statements, you, me, anybody, public figures, you're going to find things that won't sit well with people.
Do I stand over everything I tweeted about in 2013? Probably not. Do you know what I mean? Like, we can all change opinions and views. 1800 453 106 is the number. Alan, stay with us. So just want to come to some of the listener texts. I know there's more callers there too. Listener makes the point in WhatsApp. So rappers can speak about murder, violence against women, misogyny, and still make it to number one in the charts. But Kneecap voice an opinion and are slaughtered by the establishment as it doesn't suit their narrative. They never should have apologised, as they will be seen to have been on the side of right in the future. I think they shouldn't have apologised, says this listener. Rose has got in touch to say the media have given Kneecap, she describes them as untalented louts, undeserving praise for mediocre performances. What do they know about the world of politics? And I think they should too be banned. Visas revoked from the US. This is after Sharon Osbourne calling for that. We were only talking about it here on the show last week. Listener says Kneecap are brilliant. I love them, but I hope it all doesn't go to their head. They absolutely had to apologise for what they said, and fair play to them that they did. But they now must be careful of what they say, because they are a huge influence for many people. Carl is with us on the line. Carl, what's your view?
Oh, hi, Andrea. Yeah. Well, I'm very interested in what your speaker just said there. I would concur with much of what he said. I think myself that Kneecap did the right thing by apologising for one reason. Well, obviously there were two parts to it. The part about the dead MPs and inciting what would seem to be inciting any violence against somebody who was democratically elected, I could never hold with. So I think they absolutely did the right thing there.
No, they did say that was taken out of context, but no, I take your point.
Yeah, and then in relation to what they said about dissociating themselves from, they weren't supporters of Hamas or Hezbollah, I think that was the right thing to do too. I think it's important to say that they are, at the end of the day, a young rock band, hip-hop, pop band, whatever you want to call them. And I think young people, in the heat of anything of that kind of adulation that happens in the likes of Coachella, they would be likely to get carried away from time to time. But, and this is the most important thing, they have kept a consistent message all the time at their concerts and through all their interviews, whether it was to do with the BAFTAs or to do with, they are pro-Palestinian, and they used, particularly in Coachella, they used that platform to put up their messages about the 20,000 dead Gazan children. And it seems to me that our Taoiseach was able this weekend, he was at the Pope's funeral, and he was able to, the next day, make a comment, the only comment he has made in I don't know how many days or weeks about the genocide of the at least 60,000 people in Gaza. But he's managed to, focus on, this thing about Kneecap and how they should, how wrong it was for them to speak up. Well, I consider it completely wrong that the day before he went to see the Pope, went to the Pope's funeral, that his government welcomed into the Seanad, which is the highest house in the land, one congressman known as Brian Mass, who will be known to many of your listeners as a person who believes that there is no
pro-Israel.
Yeah, but more than pro-Israel. More than pro-Israel. He believes that there are no innocents in Gaza. Innocence is what...
So your point, and actually just at that, I should say, to remind listeners, at Coachella last week, it was one of the things we were talking about here, Carl, in the show, that at the backdrop of Kneecap during their performance, I think it was towards the end of the performance, and yes, they were talking about Palestine and about Gaza at various different stages, but you'll also remember that they had a huge sign or a backdrop that said F Israel, free Palestine was the words, I think, that were imprinted across the back of the stage. Robbie is with us. Robbie, do you think Kneecap are right to apologise?
I think it's probably too little too late, Andrea, to be quite honest with you. I think their career is finished in the US, where a lot of their market will be. I think it was uneducated what they're coming out with. I mean, you're looking at even the name Kneecap. I mean, go and have a chat with some of the lads who are actually kneecapped up in Northern Ireland, see how they like it. I mean, you're wearing a balaclava, in a tricolour, in our flag. I think it's pure. I mean, their management has been very poor in this completely. I mean, if I go to a gig, if anybody, listen, going to a gig, they pay their money to go in. I don't want to be preached to. And that goes from one of the biggest bands in the world, U2. I don't want to be preached. I want to listen to the music. I want to enjoy myself and get out the door.
But I suppose you probably know, you probably know going to the gig and going to the performance that you are going to hear this.
This is something that's starting to creep in, a lot more. And as I say, I think it's completely uneducated, to be quite honest with you. I don't agree with it.
Okay. So you don't, you don't think the stage is the place, Robbie?
No, it's not the place.
For political statements and commentary. And,
no.
Right. Leave it.
I mean, listen.
Separate discussions.
Your caller, the caller, that lady. I'm sorry, I didn't catch her name. And she's dead right. I mean, you mightn't agree with some of these politics, but they've been voted in. Democratically elected, and then you have a group coming up saying, shoot your MP or. Shoot your member of the Dáil. Crazy stuff. Absolutely crazy stuff.
Billy,
but I think their career is
you think there's damage for this? Okay. All right. What about you, Billy? What's your view?
Just a quote from their statement. Let us be unequivocal. We do not and never have supported Hamas or Hezbollah. That's blatantly untrue. There's videos of them shouting up Hamas, up Hezbollah, carrying a flag of Hezbollah on stage. There's a post from the 25th of February of this year with one of them in the balaclava sitting down and reading the...
Is Billy there? Billy, can you hear us? Hang on, we'll try and get Billy back. I think what Billy was going to go on to say, because I'm just looking at Kneecap's statement in full here, an extract of footage deliberately taken out of all context is now being exploited and weaponised as if it were a call to action. This distortion is not only absurd, it's a transparent effort to derail the real conversation. All 2 million Palestinian people in Gaza currently being starved to death. And it goes on and on. As I said, it's an A4 page entire statement. Therese is on the line. Therese, what's your view?
It was just... Hi, Andrea.
How are you?
I was just Kneecap. This is just a distraction from the enforced famine happening right now in Gaza and the ethnic cleansing in the West Bank. I mean, people need to read their history books. The State of Israel was founded on terrorism. The Stern and Ergun gangs, Haganah, the blowing up of the King David Hotel, murdering Arabs, Jews and British nationals. That was all when the Israel was founded.
So should Kneecap have apologised?
Look, if a people are occupied, oppressed, brutalised, resistance is going to happen, and it is actually a human right to resist occupation. Like we know, that's just the reality. Of course, extremism is going to arise. People are never treated fairly. Don't forget as well, Netanyahu is on a record in the Knesset as having sent money to Hamas, and the reason he did that was to weaken the Palestinian Authority, to strengthen Hamas, weaken the Palestinian Authority.
So what's your view on Kneecap then in all of this, Trace?
I think they're brave young men who are actually one of the very, very few who are actually telling the truth about what's happening right now. There's an enforced famine. It could stop that famine. The children are starving to death. I have seen so many images of babies and children dismembered, incinerated, shredded by American bombs and German bombs and by British bombs. And, the British Prime Minister, he's a human rights lawyer, and there's no moral outrage about that. But yet, when Kneecap tell the truth, there's moral outrage.
So you think Kneecap should you think Kneecap should use their platform and their profile to speak about what's happening in Gaza at the moment?
I think they've been very fair to apologise about maybe things they said when they were a bit younger, about resistance organisations, obviously extreme resistance organisations. But they said those when they were younger. But Netanyahu hasn't come out to apologise about the fact that he sent money to Hamas, which probably helps them. Okay. This moral outrage. And by the way, some of the best and most intelligent arguments I've heard about this are actually from Jewish people whose parents are Holocaust survivors. And the reason they speak so intelligently about it is that they know what is happening.
Okay.
Like there's a Holocaust happening right now.
The listener saying a stage should never be political has clearly never heard or been to see Rage Against the Machine, System of a Down and many other iconic music groups across history of live music, says this texter. Joe in Galway thinks that Kneecap should be banned from this country. They didn't mention about people that were butchered, killed by Hamas terrorists responsible for people who lost their lives in Gaza, according to Joe in Galway. 087 1400 106 is the number. Alan Buckley, just on this, and I know we mentioned it last week when we thought, was that the issue put to bed? And yet there's been a week, I suppose, of more controversy and more rumblings on. Do you think that this will actually all die down and settle down now for Kneecap?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think Kneecap are going to be Kneecap. And as I said that, and you'll have to excuse me, I have to go in a minute I have some people waiting to get shown some Irish rock and roll.
Right.
I might even be talking about Kneecap. But what I will say is, look, I mean, I take everybody's points. I go to a show to enjoy music. I don't go to be preached at. But as I said last week, first of all, if you're going to a Kneecap show, you're going to get a Kneecap show. Second of all, music is, by its very nature, going to talk about difficult things. The late, great Sinead O'Connor said it is the role of the artist to start difficult conversations. Some of those conversations people won't want to hear. That's why they're difficult. But what I will say is I don't think it'll die down. I think Kneecap, whatever about their career or longevity, I don't know. But they're always going to be themselves. And some of it is going to be very distasteful to some people. Other people are going to find resonance in their own beliefs. That's art, folks. That's art.
They end their statement in conclusion by saying this is why our music resonates. I mean, Kneecap's message has always been and remains one of inclusion, love and hope. That's why it resonates with generations, countries, classes and cultures and has brought hundreds of thousands of people to our gigs. No smear campaign can change that. That's part of the Kneecap statement. We'll put it up online. You'll be able to read it if you want to read it in full there. The email is lunchtimelive@newstalk.com. A lot of people still getting in touch about this. Therese, Billy, Robbie, also as well to Carl and Alan Buckley from the Rock and Roll Irish Museum Experience. Thanks a million for getting in touch, for sharing your views with us today.